We're still talking about lowering expectations. I'm an optimist. I don't want to lower my expectations. I want to go. I want to go. But apparently I need to control myself and calm down, and the adults need to join the room. So I'm willing to listen.
Welcome to 1850 Main Street. Come on in and pull up a chair. Today, Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan from the Public Square are joined by David Zanotti, the CEO of the American Policy Roundtable.
Part 2 of the series, Lowered Expectations. Okay. For the new incoming administration. How much can you get done in 48 months?
Lowering expectations. It sounds like Lou Stagner's a big guy on golf social media, and he always talks about what your expectation should be as a golfer, because every golfer tees it up. You know, you think you want to beat your handicap, and technically your handicap's an average of your 8 best scores out of 20. So your expectations are always that you want to go low. And that isn't reality. So what is reality in lowering expectations as it pertains to a presidential administration that has only 4 years, but really knows they need to go quickly in the next 18 to 24 months?
See, I lean optimistic, so it's hard for me to lower my expectations. I always think something cool is going to happen.
Then you should be a golfer because you'd be disappointed in life. You're like, well, that's how we are. Like, hey, it's way up here, and then reality hits. But no, I'm with you.
Look, I mean, somebody's got to be the dark cloud, and I mean, I accept the role here. Okay, in this, I'm the.
You've been around the block a few times. You've seen a few things we haven't seen before.
The sequel's never better.
I'm not playing Dark Mega. I'm playing Dark Cloud. All right. So
can we get that hat? We need to get that hat. Although I do like Empire Strikes Back better than.
And why is that? Well, here's a story that might help. I got so frustrated years ago. Of course, I come into public policy from business, but I also come into public policy from studies. So I did a lot of studies, and then I went back into business. And then from business, I got kind of affectionately dragged into public policy. And then once I got into public policy, the studies were ferocious, nonstop, perpetual. And not just learning from the books, but learning on the ground. I mean, how many people have read X number of state constitutions? This is what we do as a team, but you don't just read them, then you got to work on them. I can remember working on constitutional language and helping to write it, and our team working on creating constitutional language in Florida, in Massachusetts, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Tennessee, in Florida. I mean, we've worked on these kinds of proposals to understand how the law works, whether it's a federal question, a state question, how many hours, Rob, we've spent in courtrooms, how many governors we've sued because they broke the law. We've even won some of those suits.
We've won some of those suits, but what we've tried to do and model as well is it didn't matter what letter the governor had next to their name. The rule of law matters. Words matter. So that's one thing we saw that people drift away from that when it came to COVID. They were happy to have a dictator in their respective state, as long as the dictator agreed with them. We're like, wait a minute, just because you like
part of the chosen, right?
Yes, just because you like the policy of what the dictator is saying or doing, our law structure is not one to have a dictator. So we need to be in opposition to that.
And look, I have a profound bias. I mean, it's a passion, it's a love. I am not objective. I truly believe in the principles upon which this government was built. I truly believe in those principles, and I believe they bless people the most of any form of government. And for what it's worth, that's an opinion. It's a well-studied, researched opinion. I mean, I've got like some credentials behind that if you want to check my GPA and the universities that I've attended. I didn't make this stuff up. But more important even than that, we have lived with this stuff. We've lived with this stuff for 45 years. We're really, truly not kidding. And our motivation is that our kids and our grandkids would actually have more freedom and more liberty under the rule of law than we've experienced. That's the goal, because from those opportunities comes true prosperity. So, I mean, none of us is going to be here long enough to become rich doing this stuff. So I think every now and then I'm sorry, I apologize. But look, if I'm listening to these programs and I'm watching this stuff on YouTube, I want to know who the heck are these guys and where is their platform of moral authority? Because the last thing we need in America is one more bunch of people blabbing about anything. So show me your stuff. I used to have an uncle. And he did a number of Italian. All my uncles were Italian uncles because all my relatives were Italian, which meant they were always short and they always had an opinion. They weren't afraid to stick their finger in your face. And if you were younger than them, you owed them respect. And if you didn't give it, you would regret that you did that you failed to. I had one uncle who I'd get into conversations with, and he would look at me and he would stick his finger right in my chest and say, "Show me your credentials. I appreciate your opinion. Show me your credentials. Prove to me that I should even waste my time listening to you, kid." You know what? He drove me crazy. He's dead right. But credentials aren't just what you learned in school. And as an organization, we've been on the ground. So let me tell you a story. And Michael Del Giorno from your morning show laughs all the time when I said, "Let me tell you a story." He says, "Sometimes I just want to put you in a rocking chair and put a shawl over your shoulders and say, 'Tell me a story.'" Right. So here's a story. I was so frustrated with this conversation about ending the federal debt and the federal deficit. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, look, I come from business. My whole family's about how to make things work. We're not like genius engineers, but we figure if you'll show us how to do it, we could figure it out. So it's kind of the World War II manufacturing model. Okay. So I figure maybe somebody in Washington, D.C. can show me how this works. So I go and it takes a 3-day trip. I spend 2 solid days in Washington, D.C. I think it was 3 days, actually. 3 days in Washington, D.C. And I go from chief of staff to chief of staff. Now, if you want to talk to people in Congress, you got to talk to the senator's chief of staff and to the congressperson's chief of staff because they actually know how the government works. Sometimes the congressman, not so much. And sometimes the senators. I mean, we were in a big meeting one time with Bob Dole on healthcare. We had 54 people brought into this meeting, and they were highly selected people that were totally invested in healthcare. And like 10 minutes into the meeting, into the Q&A, Bob Dole said, "Well, here's what it's going to be." Bob Dole, he says, "Tomorrow I want you all to call this number." And he gave us the number of his chief of staff. He said, "Because she's the only person in the Senate that understands healthcare. I don't know why you're talking to me. I happen to be majority leader, but why are you talking to me? Because I don't know what you're talking about. You got to talk to her." And I appreciated his honesty. Made me want to throw up, but I appreciated his honesty. So back to this story. I go up to the Capitol and I meet with several chiefs of staffs for 3 days. And I say, "Look, would you just pretend that I don't know anything? It's not hard to do. Pretend I'm as dumb as a rock and explain to me how you, as members of Congress, your office, creates and spends the federal budget." And every one of them laughed out loud. They kind of put their hand on my shoulder and they said, "Oh, you poor, poor child." "You poor thing. You don't want it. You really want us to tell you this? You really? And it's like they started to dole out medications and blankets and warm footies. This is going to be a while. And so I would go through and say, "Tell me again, show me again, show me this, show me that." They sent me back with so many pages. I don't know how I got through the airlines. And then they kept sending me stuff. I will tell you, I read it all. I studied it all. I spent 3 days. I still understand some of it, but it is so dang complicated. Now that's discouraging, and they want you to be discouraged. Like, for example, the president sends a budget. What value does the president budget have when he sends the budget to Congress? The answer is
Zero.
Congress could care less what the president's priorities are. They're going to set their own. They have the power. They have the purse. Their job. That's how it starts.
And a lot of times they may get up and give a stump speech about how there's too much spending, but each one of them, the majority of them, are going to fight to spend more money back in their home district so that they can go back and say, "Look what I brought home for you. Look at what we were able to do."
Well, do you think this is a similar experience that Elon and Vivek are going to be having as they go in and try to start to trim some things? Are going to have a similar experience to you, DZ?
Perfect question. Let's all go back and view the movie Dave. All right. When Grodin goes in, all right, to help out Dave, the fake president, and says, "How are we going to do this?" All right. And they sit down for days and days and days just to get one line item changed in the budget. and they get it done over a day and a half to get one line item changed. It's complicated. Now, it can be done. It must be done. And the reason that we're presenting this information is to help perhaps build a bridge of understanding so people wouldn't realize why this new president is got to move so fast. One, he's only got 48 months. Two, the amount of compression that this is going to take to get work done on time, on task is huge. So the prioritization is going to be essential, picking the right things that they can do, but then having the vision to say there's only some things we're going to be able to start, but we've got to start them so well that they can't be stopped because they have the momentum and people believe that they can get you somewhere. So that's a big piece of it as well. So a little bit more about the budget. There are pieces and there's parts of this. You know, when somebody says, talk about Title IX, well, what's Title IX and why is it called Title IX? I don't know, something to do with the law. It's probably a book on it. A book says Title IX. Well, it's Title IX of the United States Code, which are the laws that Congress passes. So if you're going to go in and deal with something that's in Title IX, you have to or Title whatever you're working with, you have to recognize that when Congress passes some spending laws, they don't pass a law that says the Congress shall spend X million dollars. They do what's called an entitlement. What they say is people in the following circumstances facing the following problems will get the following amounts of revenue from the United States Treasury because blah, 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 blah. And they create the law in such a generic fashion that it applies to anybody who fits in that parameter. That person is therefore entitled to access to the federal treasury because Congress unlocks the door and opens the key in a statute. But then the money has to go through appropriations, which means the money's got to come from the theoretical into a budget and then be appropriated out to the agencies. Then the agencies have to spend the money. Now, here's where it gets really crazy. That's a lot of stuff, right? And it's the biggest budget in the world. And they do it every year. In other words, you got to start at zero and create the budget and go forward every 12 months.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for the lamppost. Find out what America's talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
What else would there be to get done other than dealing with a budget? Why not do once every 2 years? I mean, why are we doing it every year when the same fight is happening over and over? All the administrations know what they want for a 2-year cycle.
Secret message to Elon and Vivek. Number one recommendation for reform, put Congress on a 2-year budget instead of a 1-year budget. My hope is everybody that takes this information and sends it all over the world, maybe somebody can get that one. Maybe they've already figured it out, but we ought to have a revolutionary force of momentum that says, make it a 2-year budget, not a 1-year budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea, and it seems like a simple fix. Some of this stuff, sometimes it seems like people just try to justify the existence of their job, but it's not necessary. You know, or they do busy work. You know, that's having a 1-year budget just sounds like busy work.
Well, if they only have a 1-year budget, that gives them something to fight about all year. If you have a 2-year budget, that takes away some of the fight, right?
Exactly.
You can't justify it.
And if you're a House member and you have one term, which means you've got 2 years, the lobbyists have 2 chances to hit you for all that you're worth because, you know, there it is. You got 2 budgets, not one, which means that candidates also have the opportunity to extract from the lobbyists all the campaign contributions that they want to run in that 2-year cycle.
Yeah, for sure.
We said that out loud, didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh, man, there'll be helicopters overhead momentarily.
Well, Dave, we talked about this being a show on lowering expectations part 2. If people have listened to us on the Public Square for any length of time, they've understood how we've railed against cloture, the filibuster. Even when the Dems were in charge, when they had the White House, when they had the Senate, when they had the House. I mean, we attack everything from an independent, nonpartisan perspective. So we didn't think it was all, we've always thought it was a good idea to get rid of the rule of 60. Would you say it would be a good idea to wipe it out right now? Would that help move things forward?
I don't think it can be done, but I think it's a conversation that has to happen. I mean, give you an example. No less a mind than our dear friend, Dr. W.B. Allen, disagrees with me on this one. All right. And so I'm very comfortable being in a position where we've got a counterpoint balance on this. So we have in our organization, as you guys know, we have differing opinions. I feel like the cloture rule has gotten so far out of control that it's actually stopping the ability to reform the government and empowering the agencies. And Dr. Allen doesn't necessarily disagree with me on that, but he brings back up the idea that the reason it came into play as it has is because of a certain fear of runaway majorities. That if you got to 53 and you decided to try to change everything, okay, so it's not illegal to call for it. I think it's a really difficult practice to endorse given the time and the experience that we've had. But I know that a lot of people are terrified to go back to 51. So I'm saying, okay, how about we make it 55?
I think, obviously Harry Reid did what he did when it come to court confirmations with the nuclear option and going with only 51.
Isn't it funny, though, that became known as the nuclear option?
Yeah.
Like who died, right?
Yeah. But I also think the
democracy died. Just ask the New York Times. I knew I missed that one.
But I also think it's interesting the fact that if it was 51 on everything, if it was a majority on everything, I think those lawmakers would then have to run on those positions because they would have to take a vote on those positions, whether we're talking about codifying Roe, as the Democrats talked about for years, or we're talking about gun legislation, or we're talking about taxes, whatever you think that they talk about, they would be forced to actually vote on those things and take a stand. And again, we go back to the beginning of the Obama administration when they had 60. They could have done anything they wanted, and the Republicans could just sit by and watch. They could have done anything and everything, their wish list. And they tried for Obamacare, and that cost the Democrats a seat in the state of Massachusetts. Still blows my mind that that's what it did. So I think it would force politicians to be accountable for their votes, not just their ideas.
So we didn't hear this ever discussed on the Senate trail in that regard, and that's understandable. It is unfortunate because a lot of people do think if you have the Senate majority, that's sufficient. If you're 51-50, that's it, or 53-47, that's it. No, it really isn't. It takes a good bit more than that to be in a position to be able to move through the processes. And some people feel safe with that and they feel fine with that. Because the thought in the original idea is, well, the House is such a hotbed of radicals that they're going to be passing stuff every 2 years going crazy. And the Senate, it just needs more time to mellow these people out. Look, the United States House of Representatives is one of, if you put the word feckless in the dictionary and you could put a picture of the United States Capitol right next to it, you talk about a group of spineless, ineffective people who talk, and accomplish basically nothing. That's the United States House of Representatives. They are really a poorly performing organization. Now, the filibuster is just one more excuse for them to be that way. They say, what's the use of us passing anything? The Senate's going to knock it down on the filibuster. You see how these organizations can collapse on top of each other. I mean, there's a reason. Like, you're thinking what the energy would be if a senator actually has to vote in campaign because he can't hide behind the filibuster. What would happen if the House can't hide behind the filibuster as well? So it's one thing to say, well, we're the Democrat, we control the House, and the Republicans got the Senate, so we can't get anything done unless we choose to compromise. Problem with the filibuster is, how much compromise is there? I mean, you got to compromise the whole way to 60? So how are you ever going to stop the spending? Or it's easy just to go on continuing resolutions, continue to raise the debt ceiling, and hope nobody really is watching. Well, look, I don't think any administration in 4 years can turn that much around. But maybe, I don't know, do you think they could get it going in the right direction?
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.